Greetings, friends. I've said before that God is the universe, but over the last year, as my channel has developed and I've spent more time thinking and reacting to new material, my spiritual views have changed a little bit. I never discounted the possibility that God, the universe, can simultaneously assume the form of a being. Previously, I had thought that this God as the universe and God, the divine being, were compatible. Nowadays, I'm not so sure they're compatible. In fact, I see some serious problems with pantheism, or God as the universe, and I don't believe it anymore. This video will explain why. I've been watching the YouTube channel Koi Fresco Vishuddha Das, which originally popped up on my screen as a so-called related channel to my own. Vishuddha Das seems to be some Hindu moniker he's adopted, and I think Koi is his original name. His channel has over 500,000 subscribers and gets regular view counts in the tens of thousands. He styles his videos as advice for self-improvement and spirituality. I'll be playing one of his videos here so I can respond to it. The title is Pantheism, the religion where you are God. The title is exciting and promising. I think it will attract people in their teens and 20s. Let's take a look.
What we're going to be talking about today is pantheism. Because when it comes to God, most people have an image in their head, an idea, a deity of what they think God to be. But what if this idea is completely wrong? What if God is you and me and everything? This is the philosophy of pantheism, which is a pretty modern Western philosophy that came about around the 17th century by a man named Baruch Spinoza that has extremely similar rootings to the Eastern religion and philosophy of Hinduism, specifically Advaita Vedanta, which is something that I practice, and so I really love this westernized idea of God in everything. So what really is pantheism at the core? Well, like we just said, it is basically the belief at the most simplified level that God is everything. Not that God is in everything or that part of everything is God, but that everything that is God. In pantheism, this means that there is no such thing as separation whatsoever. Duality is a complete illusion, and this means it's a philosophy of monism. That means all of reality is oneness. All of reality is God itself in different forms. God doesn't have names or attributes or personalities like it might have in different religions. Everything simply is God, and you can't put a name or face on that. And that's where the idea of the name for pantheism comes from. Pan means everything, and theos means God in the ancient Latin language.
It seems like a sneaky way to take down God, just diffusing him in a sea of God where everything is God. Koi might see this as elevating the concept of God, but I see it as a trick where God is cancelled, nullified. It's not really a question of logic, it's a question of what you want out of life and what kind of society you want to have. The pantheists want the energy and the fruits of God, but not the Almighty himself. Koi is suggesting that all the people who personify God shouldn't trust their own instincts. Silly average Joe, the ancient Hindus knew better than you. Don't pay any heed to most traditions in the world which have personified him, they all got it wrong. Now, I know in Christianity it gets more complicated when you talk of Jesus, the Lord, and the Holy Ghost, but the point is there's still a divine being there. And God is fundamentally the creator, the author. Is a beautiful sunset the creator? No, it's a beautiful sunset. Is your dining room table the author of the world? Of course not. These things are of God, which is quite different. They have perhaps some small portion of his essence. And I wager that some beings, principally humans, have more of the divine spark than other beings do.
And although it's not as big right now, around the 18th and 19th century, pantheism gained a pretty big following in the Western world because it was practiced by a couple of famous different poets, artists, and philosophers. A few of these names you might have heard, such as Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is because both of them saw a lot of the similarities between, again, teachings of Hinduism, such as the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, with the simplified philosophy of pantheism that was really prevalent and could apply more effectively, they thought, to the Western world.
According to the YouTube channel School of Life, Emerson believed that, quote, "In following ourselves, we are therefore not merely being fickle or selfish, we are rather releasing a divine will that history, society, and organized religion normally hide from us. The individual is a god in ruins, and we have it within us by casting off all custom to rebuild ourselves." End quote. And I find the insolence of this man remarkable, being as he was from a generation which had inherited a rich and fertile land of opportunity, America, won by the blood and sweat of many previous generations. He also wanted America to make a cleaner intellectual break with Europe. I can understand wanting to be politically free from Europe, but severing the intellectual tradition is a much more serious matter. Did Emerson really believe that America could dismiss the Bible, dismiss all of European philosophy, all of the traditions from that continent, and that doing so would somehow make America freer? Here's an excerpt from Emerson's writing.
Emerson makes this pantheist connection explicit in what are perhaps his most famous lines. Crossing a bare common in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky, without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to the brink of fear, standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space. All mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing, I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God.
He says nothing of substance except right at the end. It would be very easy to mimic the style of Emerson. Went to the toilet and lost myself in the sacred experience, listening, seeing, smelling, beholding the divine, forming endless descriptions while saying nothing. You probably should not trust flowery writers because the truth doesn't have to be sugar-coated, but then again, most poets don't have much to say, they just play with language. That other famous transcendentalist, Henry David Thoreau, is discussed by the author Charles C. Mann, who specializes in geography and anthropology and history. In this book, 1491, New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus, which I highly recommend. And Mann points out that Thoreau popularized, or helped to popularize, the idea that Native Americans didn't change their environment, they just blended in with it. Here's a quote from Charles Mann. Thoreau spent much time seeking an indigenous way of thought that supposedly did not encompass measuring or categorizing, which he viewed as the evils that allowed human beings to change nature. We now know the truth about the Indians is not what Thoreau had imagined. As Charles Mann explains, quote, rather than domesticate animals for meat, the Indians retooled ecosystems to encourage elk, deer, and bear. Constant burning of undergrowth increased the numbers of herbivores, the predators that fed on them, and the people that ate them both. Rather than the thick, unbroken, monumental snarl of trees imagined by Thoreau, the great eastern forest was an ecological kaleidoscope. The first white settlers in Ohio found woodlands that resembled English parks. They could drive carriages through the trees. Native Americans also burned the Great Plains and the Midwest prairies so much and so often that they increased their extent. End quote. So much for the Indians blending in with nature. Now, this information may not discredit pantheism, but it sure discredits people like Thoreau and Emerson and the eco-hippies who followed them. Of course we want to protect the environment, but we should be careful not to think like these naive, romantic poets. Transcendentalists believe there is inherent goodness in people and in nature, but that, in their view, society and traditions destroys this goodness, and their solution is for people to become self-reliant and independent. Now, the problem with this worldview is that people are not inherently good. We lie to our fellow humans, we steal from them, we murder them, to name just a few things. Neither is nature inherently good. Nature is brutal and chaotic when left on its own. As for self-reliance and independence, we are all social beings. Civilization is a group project. Transcendentalists seem to advocate a pre-industrial lifestyle, where every man produces his own food, builds his own house, and maybe makes his own clothing too. But that's a much more stressful life. Most of us don't want to return to that. We prefer to rely on others so we can specialize in what we most enjoy.
But what is it at a deeper level than just seeing everything as God? The most important thing is that pantheism is a statement. It's a belief and resounding opinion that God is everything. And because of this, since it's just a belief, since it's just a simple statement, it's not really a religion itself, so to speak, although many people consider it to be a religion. It's simply just a philosophical statement. The same way that Rene Descartes once said that I think, therefore I am. That's not a religion, it's just a philosophical statement, and God is everything is the statement of pantheism. So you can really be from any religion, from any background, or still claim any religion or background that you want on earth and be a pantheist at the same time if you believe in this monistic non-dual idea that everything is God.
But as Coy already mentioned, most religions have a personified God, and that doesn't fit with pantheism. And if pantheism is just a statement, not only is it empty, but it has no history and no teachings for us. I would expect a spiritual worldview to be formed by observing the highs and lows of civilization over many years, and to present this knowledge in the form of sacred books.
Now, that's why it can be important for us in the modern world to understand pantheism if some of the Hindu philosophies such as Vedanta might confuse us, because pantheism just says, look, since everything is God, that means everything that we don't think is God is just hidden. It's just covered. We just can't see it because of our conditionings. And that's why this statement, this philosophy, stresses so much the importance of scientific observation, of inquiry, of empirical witnessing to what's going on to deduce what is or isn't. It's not trying to believe in something out there or to bring in an ideal of more dogmatic thoughts. It's just saying that, look, everything is divinity.
That's great if they like empiricism, nothing wrong with that, but who doesn't like empiricism? He may be putting forth a straw man, which is that pantheists are for it and everyone else is against it. But science does not determine spirituality. Most people who have faith will not lose their faith if some experiment supposedly disproves God's existence. Religions may make dogma explicit. They may have commandments on your wall that you can see, but nobody can live without some internal dogma. We all have axioms and principles, and perhaps some are better and you might say more evolutionarily successful than others. What Coy calls dogmatic thoughts are simply the best formulation our ancestors could muster for putting their wisdom into bullet points. Coy himself has been repeating a dogmatic phrase throughout this video, as you may have noticed.
And this is why the biggest views in pantheism that regard so many other religions are sometimes absent. Mainstream pantheism usually believes that there is no afterlife or before life. Again, everything is God. There are no potentials for other realms. There simply is what is here now, and that's it. There's no potential for any other reality or any other dimension of reality because God is everything that we can experience and see. And this scientific understanding and what that currently encapsulates is the universe at large. Also because of this, they don't have a belief in heaven or hell of separate or individual souls like some dualistic and Abrahamic religions do. None of that exists in pantheism.
No afterlife or before life? No potential for other realms? Is this supposed to motivate us to live a good life? It's depressing. He said science is everything we can see in our scientific understanding of the universe at large. Why this emphasis on what we can see with our earthly eyes? The physical universe is an illusion. You can believe there is nothing but illusion, or you can believe there's something real behind the illusion. Science has proven neither of those. Not all science discourages belief in a God. Many scientists who've studied genetics, for example, are persuaded there was a divine author involved in the creation of DNA. I've discussed at length the problems with Darwin's theory. Yes, you can talk of evolution in different ways. Like I mentioned, some religions are evolutionarily successful because they survive over time. But in the terms of the actual theory of evolution, there's so many holes in it. There were just these ape men, primates, and then suddenly there's humans. There's no transition of species in the fossil record that is in any way satisfying. The species just appear fully formed if you look at the Precambrian explosion. So that's just evolution. What about the planets? Why the Earth is right where it is, not too close to the sun, not too far away in the habitable zone. There's all sorts of strange things. I mean, you can't prove one way or another, but it's just there's enough rabbit holes here that it's easier to believe in God. Personally, at least for me, it makes it a lot easier. No heaven, no hell, no personal souls. So not only are there no consequences for living a good or a bad life, but you don't even exist. So Koi, you have no soul of your own, you're just part of the universe? Then why take care of your soul? Why do anything at all? Are we just going to spend all our days meditating? Or perhaps we should become hedonists. And as intellectuals, Koi, you have a channel, you're an intellect, you read, people listen to you. But now you have no personal soul, so you don't really exist. There is no mind, there is no soul of Koi Vishuddha Das. Why should people listen to you? It's a very self-defeating thing to say. It makes absolutely no sense.
So with that being said, what are some of the other popular practices or ideals that a pantheist would hold in life and use to guide them? Well, the largest and the most common is the direct worship of nature, because in a pantheistic view of everything is God, that is most easily visible through nature. It's hard to see in technology or in people sometimes. It can be covered up, but when we're in nature, we have that kind of innate direct connection to the universe. We just feel differently. It feels right. And that's why so many pantheists have such an importance on the environment, on taking care of it, and on really spending time in these natural places so it can help us come to understand our oneness with it.
Who doesn't like being out of the city on a nice day? But feeling that peace, that rejuvenation, doesn't mean you don't have a soul of your own anymore. But Koi said everything is God. So why should we be celebrating the outdoors more than cities and technologies? And he said God gets covered up. Well, based on what he's been saying, the covering would be God just the same.
Pantheists also believe that all of existence simply is matter, not that there is matter and spirit, but that matter is spirit, that matter is divinity itself. There cannot be an essence of that matter. So, like many Eastern religions where they think that consciousness pervades the matter, pantheists think that matter is pure, that matter is existence, that matter is the purest form of reality. There's no connective cosmic consciousness behind that. There simply is what we are experiencing and proving in science right now.
No, Koi. Matter is the last thing you want to celebrate. Matter is empty and dead. Matter is deception. We're only alive a short time. 99% of all humans ever to have lived are no longer physically incarnate on this planet in matter. What do you think is the purest form of reality, or the more true form of reality? What the living 1% experience, or what the dead 99% experience? And do you assume no significance to the dead? Are they completely gone? To worship matter is to move away from God. These days, we might even say it's audacious to believe in heaven and hell, in another world, in a divine being. And yet it seems right to me precisely because it is audacious. We came to this hellish planet to play a game. And the name of the game is to see if we could remember to find our way home. Can we follow the instructions God has given us, both in the form of the teachings which have been passed down to us by previous generations, not to be shunned like Emerson and Thoreau may have imagined, and secondly, by following what's inside in our heart. Some things we just know. Can we follow the instructions God has given us? Earth is a place where you can easily forget. You can get stuck here for a long time. People will tell you the earth is divine, worship the earth, all beings are divine. You will forget that matter, animals, and the earth are not our true nature. Our true nature is behind the veil. Behind the veil is our true source. Our true source is not here.
And because, again, everything is divinity, there is not just with nature a heavy emphasis on worshiping it, but an emphasis on treating all animals equally, on treating them as our equals, because there is divinity in it, that they are divinity, that they are pure and worthy of life and the ability to thrive just as we are. And so we shouldn't subjugate them or control them if we don't have to.
Animals are not our equals. Humans are superior to any other creature on this planet. And animals don't deserve to thrive just for the sake of it. It depends on how they help humans and how they help the overall ecosystem. You can argue against factory farming and needless suffering of animals, but humans are always going to be controlling nature for their own benefit, because this is our God-given right, just like the Indians turned the Midwest into a giant pasture.
And so it's very tolerant, very open. Pantheists don't say you can be a pantheist and you can't. They say, look, anyone is open to accepting this truth and really coming to know it at their core. And finally, pantheism teaches and stresses the importance of friendliness, of communication, and of openness. Not again just to religions and stuff, but to really anybody in life. Not to be closed up, not to be hateful, not to be harmful, not to be judgmental. To live a good, pure, righteous life the same way the Buddha often taught, in the same way that we see in many of the Hindu proverbs and the Upanishads and such. Because again, all these people are divinity too. They are God incarnate the same way we are. There's no separation between us. You're not going to be an angry, mad, mean, hierarchical pantheist who has an elitist personality. That doesn't fit pantheism. Pantheism stresses the importance of equality above all. There's no leader. There's no king or queen or reigning spiritual teacher in pantheism, because we are all one and we can all come to know this together. And so no one person has authority over another, because we are all divinity incarnate.
We finally come to the real issue. It's not about divinity or love. It's about authority, a narcissistic urge for power. The pantheists dislike the idea that God is their king. God has infinite wisdom and power, and they want it for themselves. That's why they claim to embrace science, because it's about showing that they're right, not giving everlasting life. That's also why they claim God and tradition is a tyrant. As for God, the Divine Father, I agree that his appearance in Renaissance paintings seems hard for the rational mind to comprehend, but those painters weren't trying to be rational. They understood God as a divine being and depicted him very well in that manner. God created man in his own image. God wants the best for man. God loves man. But that includes tough love, because you cannot just have the feminine. You have to let man develop on his own. He must choose to serve and love God. There must be a God like this. It's built into our psyche, just like our need for a real father when we're children. Some of us who don't have fathers or who hate our fathers will get into fantasies. We'll pretend he doesn't exist. And I think this finds expression with atheism or with this pantheism where the world itself becomes sacred. Think about prayer too. It's either you're trying to practice the law of attraction, which I explained over time, it's going to let you down. You might not notice it for a few years, but these affirmations, you can't control it overall. Everything has to come from God. So once you realize that, when you're in prayer, who do you pray to? Dear universe, dear great spirit, dear God. Which one of those three is most personal? The universe, I tried it for years. And the great spirit, it's Native America. I did this for years in my 20s. There's no personality there. It's not that, you small mortal on the earth, you can only think of having a being listening to you. But this is the essence of language, okay? The human body, speech, having a mouth, communicating language, these are divine forms. These are shrunk to the size of earth or fitted for earth, but it's a mere image. It's a representation of something greater. So there will be a divine being naturally to listen to you. Are you going to start talking to trees and bees and then you can get into fantasy that they're listening to you? My impression is that atheism is a masculine way to forsake God and pantheism is a feminine way to forsake God. They're basically two sides of the same coin, but the atheists are, probably more of them are men. I don't know. Maybe there's women who are atheists too, but it's more about I'm smart, I'm analytical, I'm rational, I'm a materialist. I believe all what evolution tells me. So it's like that sort of pride. But the pantheists, it's more feminine. I mean, obviously there's men But I do believe that it's a cultural thing. They become more feminized too, and you see, it's all about denying yourself. They do talk about the science. It's the overwhelming meekness of self-effacement to the point where, like, they don't even believe they exist. They have no soul. Their soul is eaten up by Mother Earth. And it's no coincidence that they speak of the sacred in the feminine. It's Mother Nature, Mother Earth. I understand if you grew up in a Christian town and your family was Christian, but your church sucked and your family didn't understand you and you hated that town and you wanted to get out of there. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, for goodness sakes. Because I grew up as an older millennial in Toronto. It's an atheist place. You've had your wish. Look at all our big cities. God is dead for a long time. I can tell you there's a spiritual void here. So none of this stuff was forced on me. I approached it on my own. And maybe you will one day too. I want to conclude this video with a clip from the Fuel Project.
C.S. Lewis put this well in Mere Christianity. What Satan put into the heads of our remote ancestors was the idea that they could be like gods, could set up on their own as if they had created themselves, be their own masters, invent some sort of happiness for themselves outside of God, apart from God. And out of that hopeless attempt has come nearly all that we call human history. Money, poverty, ambition, war, prostitution, empires, classes, slavery. The long terrible story of man trying to find something other than God which will make him happy. The reason why it can never succeed is this. God invented us as a man invents an engine. A car is made to run on gasoline and it would not run on anything else. Now God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion. God cannot give us a happiness and a peace apart from himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing. That is the key to history. Terrific energy is expended, civilizations are built up, excellent institutions devised, but each time something goes wrong. Some fatal flaw always brings the selfish and cruel people to the top, and it all slides back into misery and ruin. In fact, the machine conks. It seems to start up all right and runs a few yards, and then it breaks down. They are trying to run it on the wrong juice. That is what Satan has done to us humans.